Hi everyone. My name is Wendy Walker, and I'm a long-term resident of the Peaks of Grassi and a founding member of the Peaks of Grassi FireSmart Committee, or what we've nicknamed FireSmartPeaks. It's definitely easier to say. I'll be your moderator tonight, and I'm joined by Simon Bagshaw, who has lived in the Peaks of Grassi since 2020 and is another founding member of the FireSmart Peaks. It's great to see so many people here. I think I mentioned we were at 43 last I looked. So thanks for joining us. It looks like the majority of you are from the Peaks of Grassi, and we're also happy to see folks from elsewhere in Canmore and the Bow Valley, and I think we even have someone from Edmonton. So super, thanks for joining us. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional Treaty 7 territory, which includes our good neighbors, the Stoney Nakoda, consisting of the Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Goodstoney bands. This territory is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Traditional knowledge, expertise, and cultural practices of Indigenous peoples are crucial to responding to wildfires. So the purpose of this session is to introduce you to FireSmartPeaks, who we are, what we've been up to in the last few months, what we've planned for the next couple of months, and more importantly, how you can get involved. We're going to focus on the Wildfire Community Preparedness Day, which is on Saturday, May 3rd, and the Neighborhood Cleanup Day, or what we've nicknamed Clean the Peaks, on Saturday, June 7th. And before I turn the presentation over to Simon, here are a couple of housekeeping items. So far, everybody is currently on mute. All questions should be posted in the chat section, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. We are recording the session, so it'll be available online for those who weren't able to join, or if you want to make your neighbors watch it afterwards. So take it away, Simon.
Great, thanks, Wendy. Hi, everyone. My name is Simon Bagshaw. As Wendy mentioned, I've been living in Peaks for 4 years now, more than 4 years now. Great, very grateful that you've all joined us here this evening. I wasn't quite sure what my expectations would be in terms of how many people would sign up, but I think this is exceeding my expectations, and I really hope we exceed, or at least meet your expectations in terms of what you're going to hear tonight and what you're going to take away from this meeting. Just before I get going, I would also like to thank Charlotte McNorden. She very kindly lent us her Zoom account for this, and she's working behind the scenes doing all the technical stuff, and so very grateful to Charlotte. And Charlotte doesn't even live in the Peaks of Grassi, so that's great. So thank you for that. So I'm going to talk about FireSmartPeaks, who we are, what we've been up to, what we're planning, and most importantly, how you, as particularly the residents of the Peaks of Grassi, can get involved. Although of course we'll welcome anybody that wants to help us out. Very briefly, FireSmartPeaks is a group of residents of the Peaks of Grassi. There's 9 of us in total, and we came together at the end of last year, really just to start thinking about how we can reduce the risk of wildfire in the neighborhood. After all the evidence tells us that wildfire seasons are becoming longer and more intense. The 2023 wildfire season was considered record-breaking, with more than 18 million hectares burned across Canada, including places like West Kelowna and the Shuswap, which I think are places that for many of us living in Canmore we're very familiar with. I happened to be in Kelowna at the time of the West Kelowna fire, and it was a really very dramatic thing to witness. For many of us, though, the fire and devastation in Jasper last summer was, I think, a real wake-up call, a real sort of reality check. If something like that can happen in Jasper, there's really no reason to think it can't happen here in Canmore, and so we need to be prepared for that. Canmore is a wildfire-prone community, and the Peaks of Grassi, I would say in particular, we're surrounded by dense forests and steep slopes, and are very much part of what the experts call the wildland-urban interface, the place where development meets the rural areas, if you like. And then you sort of combine all of those things with drought, a reduced snowpack this season, all those things, the possibility of higher temperatures, and you get very complex conditions which can lead to wildfire. I think to its credit, obviously, the town is taking important steps to help protect the community. It's carrying out FireSmart fuel treatments on town land, and we've had that here in the Peaks of Grassi. The last time I think was 2016. It's going on at the moment in Larch. If you've been down by the river, you'll have seen what they've been doing down there with the thinning and removing some of the trees and lopping off branches and that sort of thing. The town's also been busy, I think, raising awareness of wildfire risk. The town held an excellent wildfire forum in May last year at the recreation centre. I'm kind of hoping they'll do a similar thing this year because it was a super helpful and informative event. And of course, the town is very much involved in the construction of the Bow Valley Community Fire Guard, which I think is a super important initiative. And for those of you who don't know, it is actually going to make its way up behind the peaks of Grassi, probably in the next couple of years when they're working on that. But I think for all that the town is doing, and it's very important, it can't all be left to the town to do. And I think it's crucial that we as residents and the homeowners in Canmore do what we can to reduce the risk of wildfire around our homes and in our neighborhoods. Of course, you might ask whether there's much we can do to protect our homes against wildfire. If you look at the scale of devastation in Jasper last summer and around Los Angeles in January, what can you really hope to do in the face of 100-meter high flames and 100-kilometer-an-hour winds driving those flames? And for sure, wildfires, as we all know, can be absolutely devastating for communities. But there's also a lot of research out there and evidence that shows that even small actions can make a big difference. That homes that take FireSmart actions have a significantly higher survival rate than homes that don't take FireSmart actions. And a key reason for this is embers. As I'm sure you know, wildfires generate huge amounts of wind-driven embers, and these can travel up to 2 kilometers ahead of the wildfire. And these embers swirl around like snowflakes. They accumulate on roofs, in gutters, they accumulate under decks and outdoor furniture, among plants and shrubs and mulch and deadfall and firewood piles. And these, of course, are all things that embers can set fire to. In the vast majority of cases, it's embers that ignite homes, and then, depending on the neighborhood, fire can more easily travel from structure to structure. In fact, research shows that on average, 90% of homes damaged or destroyed by wildfire catch fire because of embers and not because of a wall of flames that came through the neighborhood, which is perhaps what we maybe all think about when we think about wildfires. In West Kelowna and the Shuswap and Jasper, it was embers that ignited buildings. And we saw the same pattern in January around Los Angeles. So a fire could be 2 kilometers from the peaks of Grassi, it could be over the other side of the valley, it could be east or west of us, but our homes could still be at risk from embers. But there is some good news in all of this, and that is that by doing basic things like cleaning our gutters and removing deadfall and other fuel sources from around our homes, we can at least help to reduce the risk of embers setting fire to our homes. And I think if you want, I'm not going to talk much more about embers now, but I think if you want more information on embers and the sort of the dynamic around embers, there's a fantastic PBS documentary that came out recently called Inside the LA Firestorm, and you can find it on YouTube. And it deals at quite a bit of length with discussion about embers. And there's this great experiment that they film where they have a FireSmart house next to a non-fire-smarted house, and then they throw embers at these two buildings. And it's quite remarkable in terms of how quickly the non-fire-smarted house catches fire and the fire-smarted house is left fairly intact. So what has FireSmartPeaks been doing since we got going in January, and what's our thinking around all of these issues? So FireSmartPeaks has been working with Canmore Fire Rescue, and really a huge shout out to Canmore Fire Rescue, who've been really supportive on this. And we've also been working with FireSmart Alberta, basically to increase the resilience of our homes and the neighborhood against the threat of wildfire. We're doing this by working to become part of FireSmart Canada's neighborhood recognition program. And this is a national program that recognizes communities that have taken steps to reduce their vulnerability to wildfire. At its core, it's about bringing neighbors together to address risks on their properties and in common areas within the community. As you all know, because we all live in the Peaks of Grassi, it's a very large neighborhood. There's around 290 structures in the Peaks. Actually, I think it's 289. And when I say structures, I mean actual buildings. And then if you think in terms of some of those buildings are single family homes, some of them are single family homes with basement suites, some of them are condos, some of them are duplexes. So it's 290 structures, but it's an awful lot more in terms of homes. Whereas for the neighborhood recognition program, a typical neighborhood is only 50 houses. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to just focus on 50 houses in a reasonably self-contained neighborhood like ours. So we've divided the Peaks up into 6 neighborhoods of around 50 structures, which you can see on the slide there. And each of these neighborhoods has a volunteer neighborhood champion who is part of FireSmartPeaks, and they're sort of the focal point for that neighborhood. Once we'd settled on the neighborhoods, Canmore Fire Rescue carried out a wildfire hazard assessment for each neighborhood, which was something they did at the beginning of this year. And then the FireSmart committee then used these assessments to draw up wildfire mitigation plans for each neighborhood. So there's 6 separate plans, but the plans are actually more or less the same because all the neighborhoods basically face many of the same challenges. And we'll talk about the mitigation plans in a moment, but I think it might be useful just to mention some of the findings of the hazard assessments, which you can see on the next slide. I don't intend to go through the entire list, but just some that I would sort of flag there is, the assessments found that 25% of homes have fire-rated roof materials. So the flip side of that, of course, is that 75% of homes don't have fire-rated roof materials, and that is obviously something to think about. 15% of homes have non-combustible or ignition-resistant sidings. So again, 85% of homes don't have that. And then I'm just going to skip to the bottom two. 5% of homes are free of combustible debris, material, or vegetation within the immediate zone, and that's the area that's within 1.5 meters of the structure. And 10% of homes have removed potential fuel sources from what's called the intermediate zone, which is the area within 10 meters of structure. So I think there's quite a lot to think about there. I've sort of just touched on it very quickly, but I think certainly the 25% of homes with fire-rated roofs, 15% with non-combustible siding, I think that's something to maybe reflect on. I think if you're unsure of where your own home fits into those percentages, are you in the 25% or the 15% or the other side of that, you can arrange for Canmore Fire Rescue to come and do a free FireSmart home assessment, and you can sign up for that online on the Canmore Fire Rescue website. I think these last 2 bullet points on the list there are, that talk about the immediate and the intermediate zone are important because they introduce us to some FireSmart terms. There's also an extended zone, and collectively these zones are known as the home ignition zone. And I promise not to get into too much jargon. I think that's about the extent of it, but these are important terms to think about when we talk about the mitigation plans and fire smarting our homes. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes now, and we're going to let FireSmart Canada explain them to you.
As we continue to extend our lifestyles and communities into the forested and grassland areas, we become more exposed to the dangers of wildland fire. Even so, it is possible to live safely and resiliently with wildland fire. FireSmart principles mitigate a home's vulnerability by taking proactive action on our properties to reduce wildland fire risks. By addressing the home ignition zone, which includes the condition of the home out to 30 meters from its perimeter or any attached structures, you can reduce the potential for home ignitions. The residents of Aspen Street are taking proactive steps on their properties.
Hi, I'm Levi. We must reduce wildland fire risk in our neighborhood. I've created a 1.5 meter non-combustible surface in the immediate zone around my entire home. By clearing the vegetation and combustible material, including under my deck, down to bare mineral soil, and enclosed the underside of the deck.
Hi, I'm Sandy. The intermediate zone is between 1.5 and 10 meters from your home. To discourage fire from reaching our home, we moved combustible material like firewood out to the extended zone. We moved our patio furniture and renovation materials into the shed and plan to use fire-resistant landscaping products in our yard.
Howdy, I'm Colin. I've hired professional arborists to work in the extended zone, which is 10 to 30 meters from our home. They will thin our trees so they are 3 meters apart, crown to crown, and prune them to 2 meters from the ground to create a fire break and prevent it from climbing into the trees.
Hi, I'm Marie with the local fire department. The residents of Aspen Street made great FireSmart choices in their home ignition zone. Properties that extend beyond 30 meters need to keep applying these same principles, like pruning remaining conifer trees and clearing up dead and woody debris. The guidance of a forest professional on appropriate management options and thinning practices is also recommended. In subdivisions like Aspen Street, priority zones can overlap. It is important to talk to your neighbors and identify ways that you can work together.
We've taken small actions on our properties. Together, we can accomplish much more. We should visit the FireSmart Canada website to find out how we can get involved in the neighborhood recognition program and increase our neighborhood's resilience to wildland fire. Agreed.
Agreed.
Great. So I think Peaks of Grassi doesn't necessarily look like Aspen Street, but I think it gives you a very good idea of the sort of the concept of the home ignition zones and the different zones, because we're going to talk about those a little bit as we move forward when we talk about more about what we can do in the neighborhood. As I mentioned, using the hazard assessments, the committee drew up mitigation plans for each neighborhood, and these contain actions that can be taken in the immediate and intermediate zone, so up to 10 or 11 meters from our homes. For most of us, as mentioned in the video, the intermediate zone around our homes will overlap with that of our neighbors. So it's really important that we talk to our neighbors and try to agree on actions that can be taken to help protect each other's homes. Or for some of you, that might actually mean talking to your condo board or your association, or even to your landlord if you're renting properties up here. But I think just good to get those discussions going, and we can help with that if that would be useful. I think also worth mentioning that the extended zone will generally be on town or provincial land, which obviously limits what we can do in that zone. And that can be a problem. And I think for some houses that do sort of back up or that are adjoining to town of Canmore land where there's conifer trees and others which are touching their houses, that's obviously an issue there, because doing something with those conifer trees would obviously be important. So what actions do the mitigation plans contain for reducing the risk of wildfire around our homes and the Peaks of Grassi, and how can FireSmartPeaks help with that? And more importantly, how can you get involved as residents of the Peaks of Grassi? Under the mitigation plans, FireSmartPeaks will support homeowners and residents to clear and reduce fuel from the immediate and intermediate zone around your homes. And this includes assisting with cleaning combustible debris from roofs and gutters, removing accumulations of deadfall from the intermediate zone, pruning and removing branches from conifer trees that are within 2 meters of the ground, so that fire on the ground can't travel up into the crown where it can become more intense and spread more easily. And you saw a little bit of that in the video just now. And we'll also assist with things like moving firewood piles and other materials, including from under decks, to a distance that's maybe not 10 meters. So I think for many of us, that's actually town land or provincial land, but certainly to a distance as far as we can get away from the home. These, I think, are all relatively straightforward, inexpensive actions. They mostly require time and effort, and that's really where we want to help out. There are other things, of course, that you can do, and depending on your property and your resources, because these are certainly more expensive options for sure. You could also think about removing conifer trees and the flammable parts that are within 10 meters of your home. I think the Peaks of Grassi is suffering a bit from design guidelines of years gone by, where developers were required to include conifer trees in everybody's front yard and things like that. So, we sort of need to move away from that. And some of you might decide that's a risk that you're not prepared to live with and you want to remove the tree. The same with the flammable plants. There's an awful lot of juniper in this neighborhood. We have it in our front yard. And certainly for us, that's something that we're going to take care of in the next few weeks, is with removing that, because juniper is an extremely flammable plant. You can do things like replacing worn or missing weather stripping on doors, including garage doors, and then prevent embers from getting inside your property. Enclosing the underneath of decks so that embers can't accumulate there. Adding non-combustible 3mm screen to all external vents, apart from dryer vents, I'm told. And then replacing mulch and wood chips with things like rock and gravel. Again, I think you walk around the neighborhood, there's an awful lot of mulch and bark chips and that sort of thing in this neighborhood. And at the moment it's great because they're all soaking wet, but they will dry out very quickly, and then they are very flammable. A lot of those wood chips are actually underneath conifer trees as well in people's front yards. And again, you can have this issue where if the wood chips catch fire, they can set fire to the conifer tree, and then flames can make their way up the tree, which, is something we'd like to avoid. And then finally, and then these are really the big ticket items, if you like, replacing roofs and siding with fire-rated materials. If that's something you want to do, if you're planning a renovation anytime soon, or if your roof, is maybe getting near the end of its life anyway, this might be something that think about sort of bringing that forward maybe. But again, these are other actions which you can consider. For now though, we're really focusing on supporting you to clean roofs and gutters, to prune branches, remove deadfall and other combustible materials, and move firewood piles. And we'd like to do this in a way that really involves the whole community, working together to help each other. We plan to host 2 events, one on Saturday 3rd of May and the other on Saturday 7th of June. Saturday 3rd of May is National Wildfire Community Preparedness Day. And on that day, we'll have stands in the park at the east end of Peaks of Grassi, where you can get information about FireSmart and things you can do to protect your home. Canmore Fire Rescue will be there and have kindly offered to co-host a free barbecue, so there'll be food and drinks as well, which is a pretty good incentive, I'd say. We also hope to have representatives from the town and from Alberta Wildfire present, talking about the work that they're doing. Members of FireSmartPeaks will also be there, and we'll also be going door to door that day, just to tell people who maybe aren't aware of things that are going on at that end of what's happening and how they can get involved. Starting on the 3rd of May, you'll also be able to register online for help with fire smarting your home. In particular, removing deadfall, pruning branches, moving firewood piles, that sort of thing. We ask that you register so we can get a sense of the numbers of people that would like help, and also the type of work that's required. So once you've registered, somebody from the committee will come around and just see you and talk with you about what it is exactly you would like done. And we plan to undertake those activities on Saturday, 7th of June, during the first annual, what we're calling the Clean the Peaks Day, when we hope to get as many Peaks residents of all ages, children very much welcome as well, to come out and help fire smart each other's homes and properties. And we'll also host another barbecue, so there's more incentive for you there. On that day, the plan is really to help move firewood piles, to haul deadfall and other combustible materials out of yards to curbside collection points that we'll set up in advance, and where they'll be chipped and taken away by a professional arborist. And anything that can't be chipped will also be removed. This will be done at no financial cost to you. We have grant money from FireSmart Canada, which we intend to use to help pay for all of this. But we will need volunteers to help with hauling the stuff out of people's yards. So as well as being able to register for assistance with fire smarting your home, you'll also be able to sign up to volunteer to help with the actual cleanup itself. More information will be posted on the FireSmartPeaks website and on our Facebook page in the coming weeks. And we're also looking at ways of supporting other fire smarting actions. We're negotiating group rates with local companies for tree removal and gutter clearing. We're also discussing bulk purchasing of rooftop sprinklers, which is something that people have emailed us about and that people seem to be interested in. And the idea is that we can then sell them on to you at a reduced cost. This is something that the town of Banff is doing with its residents. And we'll have more on this as well in the coming weeks as plans sort of fill up around that. I'll wrap up in a second, but I just wanted to briefly touch on the issue of evacuations. We know this is an issue of concern, I think, for everybody in the neighborhood, especially as there is really only one way in and out of the Peaks of Grassi. There is, of course, a gate at the far end of Wilson Way, the east end of Wilson Way, which we're told would be open in an emergency, but of course then you would just have people coming to the same intersection at Peaks Drive and Three Sisters Parkway, where we potentially get bottlenecks. So it's something that's on people's minds, we know that for sure. It was something that was noted in the hazard assessments that Canmore Fire Rescue did. And the mitigation plans that we've drawn up actually propose holding a mock evacuation drill from the neighborhood, which was something that Canmore Fire Rescue suggested to us. This is something that will need a lot of planning with the town, with Canmore Fire Rescue, with RCMP. But I personally feel, and I think others in the committee certainly feel, that this would be a very helpful exercise in terms of helping us understand the evacuation process, including, I think, things you need to do before you actually leave your property, and also for identifying lessons that could hopefully make that process smoother in the event that it is actually something that we have to do. Linked to this, we are also keen to understand people's needs in the event of an evacuation, who will need help, who has children and pets they need assistance with, how can people be contacted, and and so on. And so we're sort of thinking about developing some sort of survey, which we would send out to people in the Peaks of Grassi to fill out, and then we would sort of compile some information together. There's obviously no obligation to fill out the survey. If there's information in there you don't want to share, that's absolutely fine. But we just sort of thought in terms of helping with evacuation preparedness, if you like, that might be a useful thing to do. And again, we'll provide more information on that in the coming weeks and on the subject of more information. So I'm going to wrap up there. Please keep an eye on the website and our Facebook page. The website, you see it on the slide there. It's www.firesmartpeaks.ca. You have to include the www. I don't know why, but if you don't, it takes you to a website which isn't the one we want you to go to. So remember that. If you have any questions, please email us if we don't get to them now in the next chat. But firesmartpeaks@gmail.com. Send us questions there. There's the Facebook page, obviously. And then if you want more resources around fire smarting and things you can do, there's FireSmart Canada and the FireSmart Alberta websites are great. The FireSmart BC website is really great. There's tremendous resources on there. All of those websites have a link to the FireSmart 101 training, which is this online training course that you can do. It takes a few hours. It's super informative. It's really good to do. You don't need to do it in one sitting. You can come back to it. Well worth doing. And you get a certificate at the end of it. So, what's not to like? I'm going to leave it there, and I'll maybe hand back to Wendy, and then we can see some questions coming in, and we'll try and answer those. Thanks very much for paying attention.
Thanks, Simon. That was great. And again, we'll be posting this presentation online, most likely FireSmartPeaks, so you can direct your friends, family, and other loved ones in our neighborhood to make sure that they watch the video. That, I think, for most of us is really hitting home, that the intermediate, immediate, and expanded area. But most likely you'll know what you'll have to do. But if you don't, you'll be coming to see us on May 3rd and, of course, on June 7th. So to the question, sprinkler on roof. So Jody, I think we've answered this one. We are looking at getting sprinklers at a reduced rate. It would be the same sprinklers that are being used in the town of Banff. Subsidizing is definitely an option for us, because if we buy them on bulk, we can pass that savings on to everyone. Mandy had a question with regards to removing deadfall from the town and provincial lands behind our homes. Simon, would you like to discuss that? That's a little bit more, I think, in your area.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Thanks, Mandy, for the question. It's a great question. It's one we're certainly grappling with. If you remember the map of the neighborhoods, I live in Peaks 4, which is the sort of one of the islands in the middle of the neighborhood where we have the walking trail that goes behind our houses, Simon Wilson Way in the houses, and it goes behind the houses on Lawrence Grassi Ridge, where there is a ton of deadfall, and this is all on town land. We've started a conversation with Canmore Fire Rescue about whether we can go in and start essentially stewarding that land and removing deadfall. We haven't had an answer yet. I think it's something that we do need to bring up with the town as well. And it's something certainly that we intend to bring up, and again, we'll provide updates on that on the website and the Facebook page. To me, it's quite a critical thing that we are able to do that. When you walk on that hiking trail, especially as you get to the west end, there's a lot of deadfall there that could be usefully taken out. So it's something we'll pursue. The provincial lands, I think, is a bit trickier. And there I really don't have an answer for you at the moment, but I think it's certainly something that we'll take up, because that certainly affects a lot of you on sort of across on the other side of Wilson Way, the provincial, and those of you that back onto the power line. So at the moment, as far as I know, we're not supposed to, but we'll get some clarity on that and we'll let you know.
Yeah. Also, with regards to that expanded area, the town has plans to start fire guarding the expanded area around the Peaks of Grassi. It will look very similar to what's happening in Harvey Heights. I don't know if you've had a chance or an opportunity to go check what that subdivision is doing. How do we describe it, Simon?
So the way they're doing it at Harvey Heights, and I think as Wendy said, it will be similar to here, is that you will have a there will be a strip of land immediately behind the houses. So if we're talking about the houses on Wilson Way, there'll be a strip of land behind the houses which will be around 150 meters wide, and there the trees will remain, and there will be some FireSmart thinning going on in that area to remove some of the trees and to sort of separate them more to help prevent wildfire moving through that area. And then behind that, so sort of between Mount Lawrence Grassi and that strip of trees, that is an area where they're going to clear. And I think, again, they're talking about 150, 200 meters where they will go in, and the plan is to clear all the trees out of that area, which is essentially what they've done behind Harvey Heights.
Right.
As well.
I'm going to jump over to Kristen's question. She had a question with regards to the fire guard and how it might interact with the steep creek risks that we have right behind our neighborhood. And after discussing, we had similar questions, Kristen, and we had a conversation with Michael Bergeron, if I have his name correctly, and Stu Walken. I'm always getting these names. Walkinshaw. And they assured us that the individuals who are going to be conducting the fire guard behind Peaks of Grassi know what they're doing. There's biologists, there's arborists, there's lots of ologists, and they will be taking everything into consideration, including that steep creeks and high risk. And if you remove debris, is that all of a sudden going to cause the mountain to cascade down on us? That's not the case, but they will take every precaution necessary. Lawrence had a question with regards to Class A asphalt shingles, which are fire rated. And I think the majority of the houses in the Peaks and the Quarry Pines have Class A asphalt shingles. If you are interested or need to replace your shingles, this is a great opportunity to investigate stone-coated steel or steel roofing. And that will just take you up a notch.
Can I just jump in on that one as well, Wendy? Because in the hazard assessments, Canmore Fire Rescue, I think, said that less than 25% of the homes had fire-rated shingles. And it's funny because when I saw that, I did wonder about that. And so I don't know if they're seeing something that I'm not. Because when I walk around the neighborhood, to me, it looks like most of them are asphalt shingles. So there is potentially an issue there. I think we can go back to Canmore Fire Rescue and try and clarify with that. I think if you're in any doubt, again, getting Canmore Fire Rescue to come and do a home assessment where they will spend more time actually looking around your property and then giving you recommendations would be a worthwhile thing to do.
Mm-hmm. David had a question with regards, or a comment with regards to pruning or relocating trees on public lands. There's a tree protection plan agreement application on the town of Canmore, I believe. And if you, I don't know if we have to apply for that permit, David. That's a really great question as I'm reading through this and thinking. That might be a question we have to bring back to Brad Lankop and Bridget with the Town of Canmore Fire Department. There are some resources on FireSmart Canada, though, on how to prune a tree properly. That, I think, would be something that our volunteer group would need to be instructed upon prior to getting started on June 7th for that Clean the Peaks Day. We'll look more into that one, David.
Is it okay if I know some more information?
That would be great.
I could tell you because I got an email from the town today. On my boulevard next to my property on 961 Lawrence Grassi Ridge, there's a lot of dead brush and dead branches on spruce trees that are very low to the ground that really need to be pruned. And I told them, can you come and do this? And I told them, if you can't come and do this, I'm happy to do it myself. It's a half-hour job. I can take care of it. And just what do I need to do? And they said, fill out this form and go ahead. Just make sure you clean up after yourself. So they said, okay, go do it. Now, I don't know how broad this is. I mean, if it's just, they'll give me a permit to do the little area next to my house, or if I go into what Simon was talking about, into the whole big area back there and, you know, do something serious. I don't know where the restrictions are, but that's what they told me. So I'll apply for it and I'll do it in my little area.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. Well, we are having another FireSmartPeaks committee meeting tomorrow. So we'll delve into that a little bit farther, and we'll make the information available to everyone and see if we can maybe perhaps identify some of those areas that we might need some permitting and include that in our June 7th Clean the Peaks event.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, David. That's really helpful.
Heather, there was an indication on is there any indication whether the gate that was recently installed on the power line trail towards Three Sisters would be open as an evacuation route? I would expect that it would be. That would be something we'd have to review with the fire department. We did have a conversation about the other gate at the opposite end of the peaks. And we were told by the fire department that they actually have keys for that lock, and that in a case of fire that the appropriate people would be called and they would come open that gate for us. It still makes me a little bit nervous because I suspect that if in a forest fire, imminent fire, I think there would be a lot of activity. So definitely some more clarification on the evacuation process I think is needed. Simon had spoken a little bit about to that, and I think it would make all of us feel a bit more comfortable if we understood a little bit more about what the evacuation process would be for the Peaks of Grassi. Thanks, David, for that link. That's really helpful. Kristen had mentioned that yes, the presentation will be very similar to the one that's planned at the library next week. It'll be a little bit more behind the scenes about how we got the committee together and the type of resources that we had access to. And Simon has a little bit more information about that as well.
Yeah, no, see, the one next week, the Earth Talk at the library, which is at 7 p.m, I think. I encourage you to come. We will be covering some of the same ground, but the audience is slightly different in the sense that we're thinking we'll have more people from elsewhere in Canmore who are keen to know how you go about setting up a FireSmart committee and how you get involved with the neighborhood recognition program. And so that will be the real focus of that session. But otherwise, covering what we've covered tonight, but certainly in more briefly than we have done tonight.
Awesome. Okay, so tree removal companies, there are a number here in town, and we recommend anybody that you guys like. We've used one for the front of our house a number of years ago. They were fabulous, and unfortunately, I just cannot remember the name now. The funding that we were able to get through the neighborhood recognition program, unfortunately, we won't be able to allocate to the individual properties in order to take the really, really tall trees down. It can be quite expensive. And I just don't think our $6,000 will be able to be spread up amongst the committee or the neighborhood equally in order to get all those massive trees down. But there are a number of great companies in town who can do tree removal.
Yeah, just on that, I mean, there are a number of great companies. Two that we've been talking to are Alpine Precision and Nordic Tree Care. Both of them do excellent work, and so one of those two companies probably will be the ones we'll be using for the Clean the Peaks on June the 7th.
Scott, it sounds like you guys are doing some things over on the other side of the valley. It would be lovely to touch base, and why don't you give myself or Simon a shout, and let's figure out how we can mesh together and really bring FireSmart Canada mitigation processes to the entire Bow Valley. I think that would be amazing. Reduced water pressure on sprinklers. Yes, we've discussed this as well. Stuart had some very interesting conversations with our committee with regards to sprinklers. He was actually down, I'll pass this one on. He was actually down in Waterton during one of their fires. And there were a couple of houses that actually set the sprinklers on their roof, turned them on, and then left town, which you would think that would be the right thing to do. But the firefighters actually had to go and turn those sprinklers off because of the reduced water pressure. And they needed the pressure to fight the fire in other areas of the town of Waterton. One of the nice things about the Peaks of Grassi is that we do have Quarry Lake. And we had a discussion with the folks who sell the sprinklers, and they do have some relay pumps available for purchase that we might be able to access the Quarry Lake water to saturate our neighborhood if we needed to, or potentially even fight the fire. But again, that's if the fire actually comes our way. And that'll be a further discussion with the Town of Canmore Fire Department, I would think.
Yeah, just to add to that, Wendy, thanks, Stan, for the question, because yeah, this came up very early in our conversations with Canmore Fire Rescue, and I think they're supportive of people getting sprinklers. I think what they would like is that we have sprinklers set up during the fire season. This is something certainly the town of Banff is recommending to its residents, but that it would actually be up for the fire department to switch them on when the fire department felt that that was something that needed to happen. And there was even a suggestion from somebody that you have a big sign at the end of your driveway saying that you have sprinklers there if you want to put them on. It's an ongoing conversation we're having. I think if we are at a point where we start doing this bulk ordering of sprinklers, then we will probably provide a list of the addresses of homes that have sprinklers that they have acquired through FireSmartPeaks, so the fire department is aware of that and they can sort of save time in terms of running around and looking for which houses might need to have the sprinklers put on. But I think the concern about the water pressure is a very serious one. And obviously we don't want to cause problems elsewhere in the town if the fire isn't up here and we've all evacuated and put the sprinklers on, like Wendy said. Thanks.
There is a suggestion that should we not leave the town Canmore cleanup to the FireSmart pros? I wish that was possible. I wish they had enough time and enough energy and commitment. Personally, and this is my opinion, I really feel that the Peaks of Grassi, we are a neighborhood, we are a community that seems to be very separated from the town of Canmore. I don't think we are a neighborhood that is high on their, in terms of evacuation and protecting the town. If a fire were to threaten this town, we are not high on the priority, if you get what I'm saying. They are going to protect downtown and the businesses prior to taking care of us up in the Peaks of Grassi. So that's why we've banded together to really take care of ourselves. It's like Simon had said, it's neighbors taking care of each other. We did have a conversation with FireSmart Alberta with regards to funding, and how come other people can't come and do this for us. And there's been a lot of changes within funding, Alberta funding, with regards to fires. It could have some political reasons, I'm not entirely sure, but they've replaced some programs with new programs, and one of the new programs that they've developed is this FireSmart Canada. So they're really relying on the neighborhoods and the volunteers to take care of the immediate and intermediate areas around their own homes.
Yeah,
Simon,
just to add to that, I think it's a good question because we're not professionals by any stretch. But I think there are very basic things that we can do in terms of clearing deadfall. We're not recommending that anybody goes out there with a chainsaw and starts taking down trees and that sort of thing. That's for professional arborists to do, and that ultimately is for the town of Canmore to contract people to actually do that work. I think the problem we have is that it's going to be a while, I think, before we see the town coming up here and fire smarting town land in this area, and so. What are the things that we can do in the meantime to actually at least reduce the risk as much as we can in terms of what we're able to do? And so that's where we're thinking, it's just about removing the deadfall and that sort of thing. It's not doing anything more major than that.
Cool. The fire guarding that will happen in the Peaks is booked to happen not this winter, not next winter, but the following. So I think that is fall, winter 26-27. So my calculation puts us at 2 more summers to get through before we'll actually have a proper fire guard around the neighborhood. Fire guarding up at the top of the High Line. I haven't been on the top of the High Line for a really long time. Can anybody speak with regards to the High Line Trail and the fire guard that might be up on the top?
I'm not actually sure that I understand the question necessarily.
Steve, maybe you could expand on that one just a little bit. Going next to Stan's question, if several homeowners want to remove trees, can you get it done at one time to get a discount on tree remover services? I think that's a brilliant idea, and I would suggest talking to your neighbors and approaching tree remover service and getting that done. And that's something that you don't have to do through us, and you can do individually or with your neighbors.
But that is also something you can do through us, just because we have been talking to a couple of the tree removal companies about getting a subsidized rate. If you do come through us, and again, I did mention it in the presentation, and it's something, as soon as that's firmed up, we'll put more information about that on the website and the Facebook page.
And that's not just for pruning, but taking down entire trees.
Yeah, for tree removal, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so we've got the library information repeated. That's great. Detailed notices about the fire guard process. That's great question, Kristen. Those plans, I think, are definitely a year or two away from being disseminated, but I would suspect it would be available through the town of Canmore, most likely through the Rocky Mountain Outlook. When we get a little bit closer to that, we'll try to make that available through FireSmartPeaks. I suspect FireSmartPeaks is a website that we will have regular neighborhood information posted pertaining to fire information for our neighborhood. Stan, you're right. We are not pro firefighters, so we definitely don't want to be doing things that requires advanced firefighting training. So we are just limiting our work to the intermediate and immediate areas surrounding our homes. So again, that's, as Simon had mentioned, that's clearing out deadfall, mulch, pine trees. The oil in a pine needle is very volatile, and when it gets heated, that's when things explode and get really crazy. So again, reiterating what Simon said, making sure that you're replacing your trees or doing landscaping with FireSmart trees, which are all deciduous. They hold a lot more water than pine trees. And yes, the fire guard that they're planning is also in a wildlife corridor.
Just on that, I mean, I'm not an expert in wildlife either, but my understanding from conversations with the town of Canmore and from people with Alberta Parks and others is that actually the fire guards can be helpful to wildlife. I'm not finding the right words to describe this, but they're not maybe as negative as we instantly think they are, and also because the forests that we have now are not the forests that we had 100 years ago or longer, and are not actually as conducive for wildlife being able to, it's not the sort of habitat that they were used to. And so I think the consensus, at least as I understand it, you know, I encourage you to do your own research, is that the fire guards will actually be helpful in that sense.
The fire is natural, and we just have not had a natural fire in this valley for well over 100 years. So I suspect that the animals are quite used to very thick forests, but that's not necessarily how it's supposed to be. Wildlife corridor P4C. Sorry, Steve, I'm not too sure exactly what that means. And we'll get a link to the Facebook page momentarily for you, Mandy. Simon, is it just FireSmartPeaks, our website, or sorry, our Facebook page?
Yes, yeah, FireSmartPeaks.
Okay. Okay, so we're heading on to 7:52. It looks like our questions have somewhat dwindled. Unless there's anything pertinent or any additional information that you guys want to add, or if we need to address, I think it would be good to just wrap everything up. Would like to remind everybody that on Saturday, May 3rd, we are hosting a barbecue. Michael from the town of Canmore Fire Department will be flipping burgers. We'll be able to do sign up for the different volunteer committees that we're getting ready for June 7th. And we can provide more information about the types of things that you guys can do to FireSmart your home. And then, of course, the second event is June 7th. That's the actual day we'll be going around the neighborhood, cleaning up the debris and trucking it out of there. Now, there's no reason why you can't start doing work right away. We intend to, in our house, as soon as the snow disappears on that front porch, we're going to start looking at getting rid of the deadfall and the mulch and cleaning, getting a blower out to get rid of the I'm going to call it crap from in the middle of the, at the side of your house, getting your gutters cleaned. That can be done well before June 7th. Again, June 7th is the day that we'll just be clearing out the debris, getting rid of it. So we can start piling it probably prior to that, Simon. Would that be
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Great. I just one thing I just want to say before we end. So I think just to say, maybe we should have started with this. We're all totally new to this. We've never tried this. We're the first FireSmart committee in Canmore, as far as I understand it. So there is a certain amount of trial and error that's going to be involved in this. But we're, I think you can assume that we're trying to do the best that we can. But we will rely very heavily on people in the neighborhood really helping us out here. And so, there's seeing some thanks on the page there, which is terrific, and thank you. But really, we really hope to see you come out and support the efforts, especially on May 3rd and June the 7th. And also just to say now as well that this is the beginning of a much longer process in terms of this is something we're going to have to start repeating every year because, as I understand right now, the wildfire risk is going to continue to increase. And so this is something that we're just sort of getting going now, but this is something that we will need to keep doing year in, year out. But hopefully it will get easier once we get over this first year. But again, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. It's really, really great to have you all take part. And thanks very much for the questions, for everyone that gave us questions. And and we really look forward to taking this forward with everybody. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks again to everybody for showing up.